Yeah, I know this is the day before spring break, but we made sure to make it worth it for you if you came today. And so it absolutely will be worth it. I could not be more thrilled to introduce our guest today, Rich Sheridan. So Rich, when people talk about Rich, in my experience, they usually use 3 words at some point in those conversations. The first is Menlo. Menlo Innovations is a company that Rich co-founded a few years ago with James Goebel. And Menlo Innovations is a company that seeks to end human suffering as it relates to technology, and they do some really amazing stuff, very much focused on making sure customers and clients have what they need. But another word that people use when they talk about Rich is joy, and he'll talk about that a little bit more. Through Menlo Innovations, Rich has been able to create a workplace where they are able to celebrate joy, make it a joyful workplace, bring joy to those who work there as well as to their customers and to their clients. Menlo Innovations is a company named after Menlo Park, which was Thomas Edison's very famous lab that inspired many people, including Henry Ford, a place where they worked together to create an environment of camaraderie and innovation. And the last word that people often use when they describe Rich is friend. And Rich regularly introduces people as his friend, and people always call Rich their friend. And Rich has truly been a friend to the Center for Entrepreneurship, to Ann Arbor and the entrepreneurial ecosystem here, and to hundreds and hundreds of students as well. And so I'm thrilled to be able to welcome here Rich Sheridan. Welcome, Rich.
Thanks, Matt. I want to just riff a little bit off of what Matt said just now. As my daughter Lauren will attest, I often refer to most of the folks that I call friends as best friends. And she'll often challenge me on that. And she'll say, seriously, Dad, how many best friends can somebody have? What's your definition? And I think Matt will back me up on this. My definition of best friends is actually quite simple. If I call up one of my best friends at 3 in the morning, no questions asked, come get me, I'm in trouble, get in your car, put on your robe, get in your car, come and get me. The people I would call best friends are the people who would do that without questions asked. And I think, Matt, I would do that for you, and I'm pretty sure you would do it for me. I want to explore something with you today that isn't so much about Menlo, but more about me. Given this is an entrepreneurship class, and many of you are probably thinking in your heads, maybe one day you want to be an entrepreneur. I want to talk about my entrepreneurial journey in the hopes that perhaps something that I talk about will inspire you. So the classic question, we'll see if our little clicker thing is working here. They told me, oh, there we go, perfect. The classic question is, are entrepreneurs born or are they made? And my view is they are in fact born and then unmade, and we spend most of our adult lives as entrepreneurs trying to get back to the entrepreneur that was born inside of us. And quite frankly, I think we were all born as entrepreneurs. I'm going to try and drive that point home with you because I'm guessing I'm going to share in some of my childhood stories some that resonate with you. Yes, that is in fact a picture of me when I was just a little kid. We did have cameras back in those days, hard as that is to imagine. There was this thing called film, and you had to get it developed and get prints and all that sort of thing. So how many of you ever had a lemonade stand growing up? Okay, first venture in entrepreneurship, cost of goods sold was probably 0 because you just went to Mom and said, hey Mom, I need, lemonade mix, I need sugar, I need water, and you just set it up at the corner. We sold it for 10 cents, 25 cents, something like that. Our biggest problem was probably location. We had the marketing thing covered. We were cute. We set up out at the end of our driveways or on a sidewalk. We probably picked a hot day in the summer, so we had a little bit of good stuff going for us, but we probably picked the wrong location, not enough foot traffic. I think that was certainly true of me. I stuck with the entrepreneurial thing. 2 main activities for me in making money when I was a kid was mowing neighbors' lawns and shoveling driveways. I'd often enroll one of my best friends with me, Tom, who grew up with me, and we'd just get our shovels out and we'd go shovel driveways. It's amazing how little of that happens these days now that we all have snow blowers and that sort of thing. There was a kid that just showed up on our doorstep a few weeks ago. We came home from church and there he was standing on our porch with his shovel. I'm like, oh yeah, this is the right kid at the right time. And he did something kind of remarkable, I thought, from a sales standpoint. Didn't know him, asked him his name, said it was Noah, and I said, Noah, how much do you charge? And he says, I'll leave that up to you. I'll do the work. You tell me at the end how well I did. You pay me what you think I'm worth. Oh, I'm in. And so he probably made more money from me than if he had set the price. So I thought that was a really interesting sales approach that he took. My biggest entrepreneurial experience, though, when I was a kid, was when I started delivering newspapers. How many of you remember newspapers? Anybody remember newspapers? Yeah. Okay. You used to get the news on something called newspaper. It was actually the technology that delivered the news. It was a little bit weird, but you deliver them door to door as a kid. You had this route, as they called it, and you would, my route happened to be in the afternoons. That's when it was an afternoon newspaper. I'd come home from school, I'd pack up all the newspapers, put them in a bag, ride my bike and deliver them to all the neighbors. And then once a week, you had to go collect from your customers. That was the word we used. You'd literally knock on the door and say, collect, and you'd be there to get your money. And actually, you bought the newspapers, delivered them, and then at the end of the week, you got paid for what you had bought just the week before, with a little bit of profit, of course. So I started to feel like, okay, I'm getting this entrepreneurial thing. But what I realized was there was far more to it than the mechanics of paying for the newspapers, getting them, delivering them. I actually had to start thinking about customer service. And so you get to know your customers, especially when you're collecting money from them. At a certain point in my newspaper route journey, I had joined the football team for my local middle school. And my day was going to now be a little bit longer at school than it had been. I went to my customers and I said, hey, by the way, your papers are going to start showing up a little bit later than they normally would. And everybody was fine, except Mr. Denny. And he wagged his finger at me. He was this grizzled World War II veteran, kind of an older guy, and he's like, my paper's gonna be here by 4 o'clock or I'll be calling the newspaper on you. I'm like, oh man. And he was way at the end of my route. I mean, he was like the third to last guy of all the papers I delivered. What am I gonna do? I wanna be on the football team. I wanna keep my route. I don't wanna lose it, and I don't wanna get trouble with one of my most vocal customers. He didn't actually tip that well either. But I knew he'd call the newspaper on me. So I reworked my entire route. He was the farthest one away, and I rode my bike to his house first, delivered his paper very first so he could have it when he needed it, and then delivered all the rest of the papers for the customers that didn't care when they got them. And that was a really good lesson for me in understanding how can we rework our businesses, how can we take that entrepreneurial attitude and how do we fit customer service into that attitude to still achieve what I wanted to do. I wanted to keep that route. Now, I also had my first experience in newspaper delivery with mergers and acquisitions. The kid that had the route exactly next to mine retired at about 14 years old, and I took over his route. Increased my revenues by about 50% at that point, and used that as a good lesson in how to expand your business when you do good service along the way. So all of this was happening as a youth, and I think what I've learned about kids is they are literally born to be entrepreneurs. I can remember one time my daughter Megan being with me at Kroger, and groceries are passing by the little scanner, and she's just standing there as a 6-year-old watching everything go by, and at the end she sees me pay for them, and she says, what does the store get to do with the money? Do they get to keep that money? I said, well, some of it. She goes, what do they do with the rest? And I had to explain to her that you have to go buy the stuff that's on the shelves, and she was just fascinated with this. So I want to just maybe have you recall in your own youth when you were doing all that entrepreneurial stuff. And quite frankly, I think what happens this is my born unmade thing, is I think we actually have those entrepreneurial instincts kind of beaten out of us over the years. Society says, oh no, don't go be an entrepreneur. Go get a job. Go work for somebody else. And we start to listen to that voice, and we forget those dreams of our youth. We forget those really incredible experiences that we had perhaps as entrepreneurs when we sold the first cup of lemonade, when we delivered the first newspaper, mowed the first lawn, and had somebody tell you, you did a great job. Much like Noah did for me the other day, shoveling my driveway. He did a great job. He was there when I needed him, he did good work, and he left it up to me to decide how much to pay him. I just think those are really important instincts. And my request of you is to think back in your own lives. Think back when you were already doing that kind of stuff, and where did it start to drift away from you? Where did you start to maybe listen as much to the world as anything and start to forget some of your entrepreneurial genes? So I think entrepreneurs are born, unmade, and then have to be remade. Eventually, I started taking computer science classes at my high school, 1971. I took a programming class. First year that our high school up in Macomb County, just north of Detroit, offered computer programming. I know it's probably shocking to some of you to think that there were, in fact, computers in 1971. There were. They were much different than they are today. But I learned how to program, and right there, boom, I could see the future. I wanted to be in this industry. I decided at 13 years old I was going to be in the software industry. My kids are still astounded by that. They're like, seriously, Dad, you decided at 13 years old what you're going to do the rest of your life. I turned 60 this year. I'm still in the software business, so I think I've decided, 47 years into it in one fashion or another. By 1976, I graduated from high school. I'd gotten a job as a programmer, which I couldn't believe people would pay me to do this thing I just love to do as a hobby. I delayed my entry into Michigan by 3.5 years, and literally while working, I started a company with that blue box down there called an IMSI 8080. There were 2 competitive boxes in the marketplace that day. That was the first microcomputer that was coming out in mass numbers. The other one was the Altair machine. And we were going to take that box and use it as the basis for a system for doctors, lawyers, and dentists to do their billing. We called the company Micromation. No idea that there was this other kid out in Seattle who was coming up with a company called Microsoft with the other competitive box, the Altair. And so I will tell you that my life is littered with missed opportunities like this. The company eventually folded because we couldn't get the computer to work. The Altair was a better machine. We should have chosen that. Apparently, I should have stuck with lawn mowing. Matt was telling me about somebody he knows who has a lawn mowing service and drives a Lamborghini now. The first program I wrote on that computer that you see, that terminal up in the upper corner there, was a fantasy baseball program. I just wanted to play baseball on the computer when I was a kid, and once I accomplished that, I moved on from there. So there are many missed opportunities in our entrepreneurial lives. I certainly had a lot of those. Eventually, I decided to come up here and get a degree in computer science and computer engineering. I actually call this my interruption period, where I stopped thinking entrepreneurial ideas, came up here to get an education. Got 2 degrees in computer science and computer engineering here at the University of Michigan, a bachelor's and a master's degree between 1978 and 1982. But around about 1980, I had this idea. I was literally walking in front of Nichols Arcade. I can remember the day so vividly. I was thinking about, what do I want to do the rest of my life? Where do I want this career to take me? And I started imagining having my own company. I started picturing in my mind that there would be this open, collegial, productive environment where there were lots of fun things going on, working on interesting technologies, interesting projects. It would be a team of people. It wouldn't be me by myself. And that, in fact, we would have enough interest in what we were doing that we would be known the world over because we had created such a great reputation for what we were doing in that room. And I wanted it to be right here in Ann Arbor. What I realized was this is a great town to be in the technical industry. The first job I got out of college, I worked in a cubicle next door to Gloria Page. She used to bring her young son Lawrence in to visit. It never dawned on me till just a couple of years ago when one of my coworkers said, "Hey, Rich, do you remember when Gloria brought her son Lawrence into work?" I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "Did you ever think about who Lawrence became?" I said, "No." He says, "Think about it. Lawrence Page. Another missed opportunity." Became Larry Page, founded Google. Yeah. So, but the reason I tell you about that dream I had in my head, and I will come back to it later, is you may already be carrying some of those dreams in your head. What I want to encourage you is don't forget them. They could be the most important thing you carry out of this university. Hold on to those dreams. They, in fact, are gifts that have been given to you. They might come to you just before waking. They might come to you just before falling asleep. They might come to you while you're walking down State Street in front of Nichols Arcade. But when they come, hang on. Don't dismiss them. Don't say, "Oh, that's just a dream that won't actually happen." Because it's amazing what could happen eventually. Now, I stayed in my interruption period. I took a job right out of college. I graduated in 1982, and I will tell you, that was probably, even to this day, one of the biggest times to graduate from a place like the University of Michigan with a computer science degree. The IBM PC was just coming out. There was soon going to be computers on every desktop. Bill Gates and Paul Allen wanted to make sure of that. They wanted to have a computer in every home. 2 years later, the Apple Macintosh would come out of Apple. This was the time to be in this industry. And so all of us were getting swept into companies all over the country. I had job offers from one side of the country to the other, but I decided to stay here in Ann Arbor. And I thought, I've got the world by the tail. This is going to be an amazing career. I love what I do. I love how I do it. I love how exciting this industry is. But very quickly, I hit a trough of disillusionment. Very quickly after graduating from Michigan and taking a couple of jobs around Ann Arbor, my career, my chosen profession, the thing that made my heart sing, started to betray me. We started having missed deadlines, bad deliveries to the world, blown budgets, unhappy customers, unhappy peers. I kept climbing up the career ladder. I kept getting rewarded for creating what I thought were substandard results. And by my mid-30s, I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to be in this profession anymore. I was trying to figure a way out. And I will tell you that you will run into those periods in your life. This is a great place to get an education. That diploma will open a lot of doors for you, but then you're going to go through one of those doors. You're going to end up somewhere, whether it's your own company or somebody else's. And then one day you're going to say, "This isn't going as I thought it would." And these are perhaps the most important moments of your life. As parents, we all would like our children to avoid the pain that is going to happen inside of their jobs, their careers, their families, their lives. But in fact, the greatest lessons you can learn in life are often going to be coming out of those pain-filled experiences. You can learn so much from pain. Can't learn everything from pain, but you can learn a lot. And so there I was, stuck in my trough of disillusionment. I was actually starting to take long drives to work. I didn't want to be there anymore. At this point, I worked on a company out by Jackson and Zeeb Road on the west side of Ann Arbor, and I found myself getting up in the morning and not taking the most straightforward route there. What I found was I was taking the long country dirt roads. I was going down Liberty past Zeeb Road. I was driving out into the country past all these bucolic scenes of steepled churches and sheep pastures. And I kept going and I kept going, and finally it dawned on me, "Rich, what are you doing? Why don't you want to be at work anymore?" Now, interestingly, I started to rely on some very deep personal character traits of persistence and patience and optimism. I started looking for answers. And what I will tell you is probably one of the most important lessons of entrepreneurship is that entrepreneurs are problem seekers and problem seers. We look at the world differently. We see problems and we don't say, boy, why does it go like that? How come this happens? What can be done about it? We look at a problem and stare it down and say, what can I do about this? How can I make this part of the world better? And that's exactly where I was in my career. I was having lunch today over at Mujo. I've been told maybe that isn't the best place to have lunch. I don't know. It was okay. I had a burrito bean bowl. It seemed pretty healthy. It was tasty. So I'm not sure what's wrong with Mujo, but I've been advised you should go to Pierpont or something like that. But every one of you goes through the same thing, I bet, every single day when you eat here. I got my little burrito bean bowl in a plastic tub, and I got a plastic fork, and I got a bottle of water in a plastic thing. And at the end of the meal, all of us, don't we? We want to be responsible citizens, right? And what should we do? We should recycle, right? Shouldn't we? It's a plastic bowl, it's got a plastic lid, it's a plastic fork, it's a plastic water bottle. And so we walk over to those 3 bins, the recycle bins, right? You know where I'm going with this, don't you? Do you know what to do with everything? Could you told me, if you were standing there with me, could you have told me which bins to put those things in? I couldn't figure it out. Oh, they have a little graphic there, but none of my stuff matched the graphic. And of course, my first thought is, how is that possible? Mujo's right over there, the bins are right here. They know what they're delivering. Did the people who put the graphics together not go over and say, hey, what do you guys sell over here? What does it look like? The graphics themselves are generic. I'm pretty sure I did the wrong thing. What I mean by the wrong thing is, I'm sure I threw some things away to landfill that could have been recycled. I'm sure I put a recyclable thing in the wrong bin. How is this possible? Known inputs, known outputs, I'm the agent in between. Couldn't they figure this out? Dawned on me today, why doesn't Mujo just put little stickers, little orange, yellow, green stickers on every piece of thing they sell, and then have the bins colored orange, yellow, and green over here, so that when I get done, I just look at the sticker and go, oh, boop, green goes there, orange goes there, yellow goes here. It's a disease after a certain point. I will tell you, this is how entrepreneurs look at the world. Everything that goes wrong, we're trying to fix it. You'll go crazy. You're like, oh, we could fix this, we could fix this, we could fix this. It's a delightful place to be. Problem seekers become problem seers, and then we start to imagine a solution. I will tell you that I think in the curriculum they teach here in the Center for Entrepreneurship, this may be the central lesson for all of you. How do we get you to look at the world through the lens of problem seeking and problem seeing so we can begin to imagine creative solutions? So there I was, disillusioned, trying to escape, taking long possible drives to work. I did, in fact, have a plan B. I was going to abandon Ann Arbor. I was going to pick up my wife and 3 daughters and move to the boundary waters of Minnesota and start a canoe camp. Lauren's over here laughing, my daughter, right? Because she's like, do you really think Mom and I would, and the girl, Mom and all of us would have followed you? It's the same thing my wife says every time I bring this up. She's like, are you serious? Canoe camp? Now, I will guarantee you there'll be at least one guy here who says, hey, Rich, let's talk about the canoe camp. Seems like an awesome idea, right? And it was funny, I was being interviewed about entrepreneurship by a student. I get a lot of students from the university come and they want to talk to me about my journey, about the company, about joy and all that sort of thing. And I told this story. And she asked me a question no one had ever asked me before. She said, why a canoe camp? Why was that important? And that stopped me dead in my tracks because I'd never actually thought about it. But I had. There was a reason I wanted a canoe camp. And I think it has everything to do with entrepreneurship, the entrepreneur in me. Because how many of you know what I'm talking about when I talk about the boundary waters of Minnesota? Show of hands if you've ever been there or you at least know what it is. Okay, so most of you are not raising your hands. And so let me describe it to you. The Boundary Waters are the northernmost part of Minnesota. It is a place in Minnesota that is untouched by human civilization. That place hasn't changed for 1,000 years. There's no electricity. There are no cell phone towers. They even restrict aircraft flyovers because they want to keep it pristine. When you launch off of that rock with your canoe and go a couple of portages in, you are cut off from human civilization. Everything is on you. Whether you live or die, whether you eat or don't eat, whether you have a warm night's sleep or a cold one, whether you are wet or dry, whether your matches work to light a fire or not, it's all on you. And that is so different than the world we live in here, isn't it? Where so much of life is just automatic. We take it for granted. It's taken care of. We don't have to think about it. But up there, you have to think about everything. And I realized in telling her that story that this is why I love being an entrepreneur. Because in many ways, while things are still well taken care of for me in the way society is organized and electrical grids and cell phone towers and the internet and all that sort of thing, entrepreneurship is the closest thing for me to being in that canoe camp. It is the closest place we can be in charge of our own destiny and still be in the civilized world. And I realized this was an important story about my entrepreneurial journey. So I had to get out. I had to figure my way out. I wasn't going to do the canoe camp. My wife and daughters were too important to me. I wanted them to be near me, and it wasn't going to happen in the Boundary Waters in Minnesota. So what I did was I became a student again. And let me assure you, this is probably as important an entrepreneurial lesson as ever, is you must remain a student. You must continue studying. For me, the journey out led me to authors and books. Not all of these books have I read, but these are books at Menlo. Many of them I have. I started looking for answers. I started desiring to figure out a better way than was customary. I knew there was a better way to do the software industry than was being done. I was determined to find it. What dawned on me in this moment was that the problem with the technology industry, with the IT industry, with the software industry, with however you want to describe the business that I'm in, it was not a technology problem. It was a human problem. It was a human organization problem. It was an organizational design problem. So the books I was drawn to were not technical books. The books I was drawn to were books like Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, on the art and practice of building learning organization, Tom Peters' book, In Search of Excellence, Peter Drucker's books on management. Every one of these books was showing me a way forward. They were showing me a picture of the future. They just didn't tell me how to get there. That was left as an exercise to me. And so I would encourage you, even if you have to skip class, stay a student. Study, read, ask for book recommendations from your friends, but know that every book that you read has to speak to you. You can ask me for the books that I've read, the ones that mean a lot to me. They might not mean the same to you. That's okay. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me or anything wrong with you. The relationship between author and reader is a very personal one. You have to find your own voice inside of those books. But I would encourage you, if you want to be an entrepreneur, read. Now, a lot of folks ask me, okay, Rich, this is cool. You got me excited. I want to be an entrepreneur. When's the best time to start? Should I start now when I'm still a student and don't have a lot of attachments and I don't have a house and I don't have that wife and 3 daughters or husband and 3 sons or whatever? Is now the right time to start, or should I wait? Should I go get experience? Is it good to start when you're young or start when you're old? There is no answer. No crisp, clean answer. Both are equally viable. The answer that comes out of it is your answer, but I will tell you that the best time to start a business is 20 years ago. Just like the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. But the second best time to plant a tree and the second best time to start a business is today. The beautiful thing is, you don't have to stop being a student You don't have to quit your job. I didn't. When I started Menlo, I was still a VP of R&D out at Interface Systems. I hadn't actually officially started the business per se, but I crafted inside of that tired old public company that I was so disillusioned in. I crafted something brand new inside of an organization that was tired, old, distraught, and where I was disillusioned, and I was one of the leaders. But within 2 years, I had transformed that company from my perch as a VP of R&D out on the west side of Ann Arbor. And I built a company inside of that company. It was delivering great value, so nobody thought it was nefarious that I would start a business inside of a business, and it wasn't really a business, but I created what I wanted to create inside of that organization. And I might still be there to this day. Yet in 2001, 2 years after I started that experiment out in Interface Systems, we'd been acquired by a California parent, and the internet bubble burst. It was the first big rocking motion of the stock market in my lifetime. And suddenly hundreds of thousands of people like me were out of work. Interface System was shuttered. I was kind of the guy locking the door. You know, it's one of those don't let it hit you in the rear when you're walking out the door. And I went home and I told my wife that I'd lost my job. And with tears in her eyes, she looked at me, she says, "You're unemployed?" And I said, "No, honey, I'm an entrepreneur now." Took her 6 months to figure out that entrepreneurship actually pays less than unemployment. And by then we were profitable, and a few years ago she said it was the best idea I ever had. So, yes, you have to be a little bit crazy to be an entrepreneur, but I think it's a really good kind of crazy because you fundamentally will believe that you can change the world. Hang on to that belief. So what happened? What happened for me is what I believe can happen for every one of us. Entrepreneurship is ultimately a journey of self-discovery. It is a unique journey for each and every one of you. My story cannot be your story. Your story isn't anyone else's story. We can learn from others. We can be inspired by what others have done. We can look to them for examples, but ultimately you have to figure out what makes your heart sing. And it's a unique expression of you. For me, what I wanted to do was build things. I'm at my heart an engineer. Engineers delight in building things that get out into the world and delight others. We delight when somebody later comes back to us and says, "I love that thing you built. You made my life better because of work you did with your heart, your hands, and your mind." That's what I desired to do, and I get to do it every day now with the company I'm inside of. So this has been a period of my life for the last 16 years where I have never worked harder. I have never had more fun. I get up early, I stay up late, I sleep incredibly well, just ask my wife. And I'm excited every single day I go. And what I'm excited about is serving others. Now this is an odd picture, but the picture has a story. Because after writing a book, a business book that has the words joy and love on the cover, I can tell you that it's a vulnerable moment when you release a business book called Joy Inc. And the world wanted to know, Rich, where does the joy come from for you? And I thought back to that little kid who typed a 2-line program into a computer back in 1971 when I was a freshman in high school. But that wasn't where the joy came from for me. I had to dig back even further. I had to dig back to that snow shoveling, lawn mowing kid, lemonade stand kid, and I thought about one story that was so meaningful to me. It opened up my mind to who I am and what makes my heart sing. When I was about 10, my parents bought the equivalent of an IKEA bookshelf. Buying new furniture back in the 60s was kind of a big deal, especially for them. It came in a cardboard box. It was out in the garage. And when they went out to dinner and a movie one night, which was unusual for them, I, at 10 years old, was left home on my own. It was okay. I went out in the garage and I built that bookshelf. I was so excited. There were like 50 pieces of wood, 200 nuts, bolts, and screws, 38-page user manual, because this was not IKEA. And I couldn't wait to show it to my mom and dad. Oh no, I built it in the garage. Mom wants it in the living room. So for the next hour, I inched this 8-foot long, 6-foot tall shelving unit out of the garage, up the sidewalk, up over the stoop into the family room, through the utility room, into the kitchen. I pushed it right where Mom wanted it in the living room. My 10-year-old memory says I didn't harm it a bit. I set up my dad's books, my mom's knickknacks, and when they walked in the door, I had the stereo all wired and playing my mom's favorite album. And she cried. Joy. Joy in serving others. I believe every one of us is wired to serve others, and when we build a business to serve others, it is the joy of entrepreneurship. That idea that an idea in our head and the work of our hearts, our hands, and our minds can ultimately delight the people we intend to serve is what drives me every day at Menlo, and I think will drive you every day in what you want to do in your lives. And you can do that as an entrepreneur that starts your own business. You can do it as an entrepreneur within whatever organization you work in. But know that somewhere inside of you already is your version of the bookshelf story. This was the second location for Menlo, is at the top of Carytown. It's where Farm Logs is now. And I will tell you, 6 years in, something unusual happened for me, something that just blew me away. That's why I'm going to tell you to hang on to your dreams. 6 years into Menlo, one day I walked in and I see this crazy, noisy, fun-filled, human energy-filled place. And I stopped dead in my tracks. And this little voice in the back of my brain, like a little jack-in-the-box, popped out and came up and it said, "Hey, Rich, remember that dream in front of Nichols Arcade when you were 20 years old? It's just 30 years later." The voice said, "Congratulations, you did it. You achieved your dream. You built the thing that you had pictured when you were a 20-year-old. Now the world comes to see it. 3,000 to 4,000 people a year come from all over the planet to see this thing we've created at Menlo. The book describes it in utter detail, and now I get to speak all over the planet about joy in the workplace. Who knew?" I simply want to encourage you to hang on to your dreams, your entrepreneurial dreams. Entrepreneurs are born. Every one of you was born an entrepreneur. You may have been unmade. Your job, remake yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. Well, we'll maybe take a seat here for a minute or two. Let's just maybe even, normally I ask a few questions, but I have a feeling that they might have some questions for you given that presentation. So why don't we just go ahead and go straight to audience questions. Does anyone have something they'd like to ask Rich?
So you mentioned, I know that it was like a long presentation, but you mentioned the Mujo revelation. So if you take the products that Mujo has and color them, and then you have trash cans or recycle bins as those colors, how do you get that type of design standardized, that if somebody from Florida came in, they'll be able to see what you designed and instantly know that, yeah, this is supposed to go here, this is supposed to go there?
Yep. What I would suggest is one of the most famous phrases inside of Menlo is "run the experiment." Two of us could literally go out to Office Max or maybe the local bookstore here and get a little packet of sticky dots. Go get some wrapping paper and wrap every one of those bins that are right near Mujo. Go to Mujo and say, "Hey, we want to run an experiment to see if we can improve recycling." I'll bet they'll play along. And you just go through and you literally color code everything. Maybe you put a big sticky dot over every one of those bins and just say, and see if you can change behavior and watch what happens. And if that works a little bit, or if it doesn't work at all, then adjust. And as you get that working, you could start to expand it across campus, see if you can get others to participate, and eventually maybe you can make a business out of it. I don't know if there's a business model behind what I'm describing, and that's an important question to have. I'm guessing, though, that just how you guys are wired and what you think about all day long in terms of your care for this planet, this might be an interesting student project, because ultimately entrepreneurship isn't necessarily always just simply about making money it is about making a sustainable enterprise. If you could get volunteers to do it, get organizations to participate, and you achieve the new behavior, I think you've learned an important lesson in entrepreneurship.
Excellent.
That's a good question, and what I'm going to do for good questions is someone is going to hand you a copy of the book. There we go. There's 5 more copies here, just so you know. Sorry, or 4.
Oh, we have a couple questions up here.
What's the best way to facilitate joy in the workplace and working together?
Yeah, we get a lot of attention for our very positive culture at Menlo. In fact, there's a unit of the Ross Business School that I would highly recommend you figure out a way to get into their classes called the Center for Positive Organizations. And I'm a charter member of their consortium and regularly speak at their conferences. I think all of us know in our hearts that you probably don't have a sustainable enterprise unless you have a sustainable culture within it. What I have found is that there's 2 really great ways to create a sustainable culture. One is find that laser beam external focus. Ask yourself as a company and as leaders, visionary leaders within the company, who do we serve and how do we want to delight the people we serve? And then as you launch and get going, curate your stories along the way that are the stories that reinforce that cultural focus. My business card now says Chief Storyteller, and I found that that's probably one of the most important roles I play as CEO.
I think there was a question over here.
I saw one up over here too, I thought.
Can you speak towards the team element of your entrepreneurial endeavors? Did you primarily rely upon yourself, or did you rely upon other people to get to where you wanted to go?
I'm not sure I heard the question.
Can you speak to the team element and how you were able to, how much you relied on the team versus how much you just kind of took things in your own hands?
Yeah, I am wired personally to be in relationship with other people. It's just sort of my own DNA. And so I knew I could not do this alone, and I didn't want to do it alone. I think it's also a fundamental act of leadership to encourage followership in others. And I'm actually writing a book on this very subject right now. I think there are many, many ways to do that. I think in our own probably evolutionary wiring, smelling authenticity in a leader is probably one of our most finely tuned senses of smell in all of us. And maybe it was born out of days when somebody said, "Hey, follow me up over this hill." And then you got eaten by a dinosaur if you didn't follow the right people. But I think that the humility of never asking people who are going to work with you to do anything you're not willing to do yourself. I remember one day in that space, I was just going around. We couldn't afford garbage collection at Menlo every single day. It's one of those things you decide as an entrepreneur, how often do we want people to come by and do the janitorial stuff. And so one day the garbage cans were full after lunch, and I just walked around the room and I'm picking up all the garbage. I'm going to take it out to the dumpster in the Carytown parking lot. And one of my team members stopped me and said, "Rich, why are you emptying the garbage?" I said, "Well, why not?" They said, "Well, you're the CEO." I said, "You're billing, you're making me money. I got nothing else to do. Why wouldn't I do it?" And they were like, "Well, doesn't that Shouldn't you have somebody doing that for you? I said, well, I would never ask you to do something I wouldn't be willing to do myself, even if it includes emptying the garbage or cleaning the bathrooms. And I think that, especially in the early days, I think that's a really important thing to think about, is how do you demonstrate your leadership character to the people around you? Thank you. 2 more. Timing might be right too.
There we go.
Hi, my name's Irene. I'm right here. Got you. Right here, right in front of you. I got you.
Excellent. Hi.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good. Like, what do you do on those bad days? Like, where you hit like a roadblock in the office or in your social life out of the office. Like, how can you still inspire joy? It's kind of like something I'm struggling with.
Sorry, I didn't hear it again.
So, sorry, I didn't quite catch it either. Okay. Can you just restate it one more time for
like,
us?
The sound in here isn't quite good. So.
Like, what happens like when you hit a roadblock, right, in your work, either inside the office or like you run into like one of those hard days, where either outside in your social life or in the office, like how can you still inspire joy? Like,
yes, yeah, we're all real human beings, aren't we? When we have about 45 people that work at Menlo right now, and I always describe every one of us, just so we're clear, I'm including me in it, as a salty bag of hormones that walks in the door every day. We carry whatever happened at home, whatever happened in life, anything that's upsetting us in the world. And I think, one of the most important things as leaders that I think we need to do is keep our emotions under control while not simply presenting a false image. And for me, and I'm not perfect at this by any means, and my wife works with me, she will attest to this. Part of it is relying on your core values as a person. For example, always make sure you're treating others with dignity and respect. I think one of the key dangers of any human when dealing with another one is we project whatever our feelings are, whatever our hurts and pains are onto another human being. We assume they're maybe going through the same thing we are, thinking the same thoughts we are. I have found in general, if I'm feeling it the other way, if somebody's coming in the office and they're upset or they're doing something that seems out of character for them, probably the most important question I can ask that person if I want to talk to them about what's going on is, are you okay? And just stop and listen to what happens after that, because you might find out that something really terrible happened outside the world in their lives, and the best thing you could do as a leader is step right into that area of their lives and be the empathetic support you need to be. Now, I messed up a few months ago with a couple of my team members. I didn't behave particularly well, and I kind of knew it. Nobody said anything to me that day, but the next morning, one of our team members pulled me aside, said, "Hey, can we talk?" And I sat down and I said, "This was about yesterday, wasn't it?" She said, "Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about it." And then she looked at me and she said, "Are you okay?" And I was fine, so I needed that talking too.
Well, thanks so much, Rich, for
You bet.
spending time with us this afternoon, and let's express our gratitude.
Let's check out a religious answer. So you go to Genesis. Genesis is in the Bible, but it's also part of all the other major religions, Islam, Judaism. It's also in the very, very beginning of the Bible, right? I didn't read the whole thing. So I went into Genesis, and you read, God, who's the creator, created mankind in his own